tanned the significance of patience, strategy and self-control. From that moment on, Taekwon became a guiding light in Taeko life, steering him through doubtful periods and advising him on his self-improvement journey. Japan was nearing a tipping point each day. Tensions between Toyotomi and Tokugawa clans who fought over control of the country grew louder. War rumors reverberated through the villages spread by merchants and travelers, with samurai sharpening their swords and feudal lords conscripting soldiers. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and trepidation. Despite his youthful age, Taeko felt the call of battle. War was an opportunity to prove his worth on a larger stage, to test his skills in real combat and to achieve the glory he longed for. He had been inspired by the stories of great warriors and believed that his destiny was to be found on the battlefield, where he would be able to fight alongside other samurai and leave his mark on Japan's history. The coming war was not only a threat, but it also held the promise of adventure and prestige for the young and ambitious Taeko. The Battle of Sakara was approaching like an ominous storm, poised to shake the bedrock of feudal Japan. The year was 1600 and the country was torn apart, with the Toyotomi and Tokugawa clans disputing supreme power. On one hand, the Toyotomi, led by Hiyori, son and heir of the late Toyotomi unifier Hideyoshi; on the other, Tokugawa Yasu, a shrewd and ambitious feudal lord bent on capturing control of Japan for himself. Between the two clans, tension was spreading, flaring up the ambitions of samurai and feudal lords throughout Japan. This was a shifting period of alliances and betrayals, where loyalty was tested by the sword. Driven by a fierce desire to prove his worth, Taezel decided to join the forces of the Western Army, allied to the Toyotomi. He enlisted under the Shinmin clan banner, led by Yukita Hai, one of the most powerful and loyal feudal lords in Hiyori's service. The Shinmen were famed for their bravery and skill in combat, with So seeing them as an exciting opportunity to fight alongside seasoned warriors and make his mark on the battlefield. Teso's decision to join the Shinmen clan was not just a matter of chance. He felt a deep admiration for Yukita Hai, a leader who epitomized loyalty, courage and honor, which the young samurai fought for himself. The clan's ties to his paternal family, using the name Shinmen, also shared by his father, reinforced his sense of belonging and his desire to fight for a greater cause. Sekigahara was the ideal platform for him to show the world his sword skills and achieve the glory he longed for. He felt that his fate was inextricably woven with the fate of Japan, with his sword shaping the country's future. The morning sun had hardly risen when both armies met on the Sekigahara plain. The cold fog of dawn still blanketed the battlefield, forming a ghostly atmosphere that heralded the horror to come. The tension-filled silence was broken only by the clanking of armor, the neighing of horses and the whispered orders of commanders among the throng of samurai. Taeko felt the heart pounding in his chest. A primitive and inevitable feeling of fear tried to overwhelm him, but he suppressed it with the sheer force of his will. Adrenaline rushed through his veins, paying his senses and readying him for combat. The sound of roaring cannons burst the silence, hurling iron balls across the sky and exploding among the enemy troops. The earth trembled underfoot and gunpowder smoke mingled with the mist, obscuring the battlefield. War cries echoed everywhere as samurai clashed in a turmoil of steel and wrath. The clanking of swords joined the pain cries and wails of the dying. The smell of blood and gunpowder pervaded the air, making for sickening and terrifying atmosphere. Wielding his sword, So threw himself into the fight with the savagery of a hungry wolf. He moved with agility, ducking in and display their skills. Kii accepted duels as a way of increasing his own fame and testing his combat techniques. Aware of his son's inexperience, Munai banned him from taking part in the duel, but Taeko, blindsided by his youthful temerity, disobeyed his father and inscribed his name on the billboard in defiance of his father's authority. News of the challenge quickly spread. Taeko's courage in facing unexperienced samurai like Adimi sparked astonishment and disbelief. When Adima Ki learned that it was a 13-year-old boy who had accepted the challenge, he approached the boy's monk uncle. He told him that at the appointed time, Taeko would have to show up and apologize before everyone for his childish antics. The monk said he would talk to the boy, but warned the warrior that he was not a normal kid. His spirit was like that of the forest beasts, and it was rumored that he trained his skills with the mountain tangle. When the time came, the square was crowded with onlookers eager to witness the unequal confrontation. In his his imposing black robes. Adachi entered the combat arena wielding his katana tackle, clad in simple clothing and carrying a wooden bulin. Looked fragile and unprepared against the veteran samurai. It looked like David versus Goliath. Taiza was not there to apologize but to fight. The duel commenced with powerful thrust. Araki attacked mercilessly, hoping to end the fight quickly because he could not risk being humiliated by a young boy. Agile and intuitive, so definitely dodged the blows using his youth and speed as weapons. The young man then showed surprising determination and ferocity. Ushi attacked Kii with all his strength and speed, surprising his opponent, not having expected such an aggressive offensive from a boy. Kii was rapidly overpowered and put on the defensive. Ushi disarmed him and with a powerful blow seriously wounded Kii in the head. The duel resulted in Animac Kii's death from head trauma, marking Musashi's first victory in Mortal Kombat. Dao's triumph further inflated the young man's wild ego, which would later become known as Musashi. This duel made a profound impact on Musashi's life. The victory over a trained and experienced swordsman not only cemented his confidence in his abilities but also set him on the path to becoming a legend. However, while Tazo was starting to prove his prowess as a swordsman, he still had the spirit of a forest demon. However, if he could not tame his inner beast, he would never achieve the greatness he sought. Following his surprising victory over the experienced samurai, Tezo's name spread as a talented young swordsman, but his brashness and arrogance also took precedence, making enemies wherever he went. Both proud and impulsive, so never backed down from a fight. He viewed fighting to sharpen his skills and assert his superiority, commanding respect through brute force. The alleys and clearings around Kuruku turned into scenarios for impromptu duels where So vented his fury. However, he was captured one day and handed over to the famous Zen Buddhist monk Takuan So, who guaranteed his captors that he would bend the savage spirit of that beast. The monk tied Moshi up and hung him from a tree branch. The young man ranted uncontrollably at the monk, who took the most appalling insults and threats without letting his spirit be shaken. Teiko found himself powerless and humiliated. The silent forest magnified his loneliness and pushed him to confront his own demons. Teiko was bound to the tree for days, with Takuan visiting him sporadically, not to free him but to tease him with questions and teachings. True strength lies not only in the muscles but in the mind. Tawan said the sword is a powerful tool, but it can be used for good or evil. A true samurai pursues harmony, not destruction. The tree experience served as a trigger for Teiko's transformation. He was faced with his own hubris and impulsiveness and started to into a self-knowledge and self-improvement tool. Teiko started to look to the sword not only for mastery of technique but also for mental discipline and inner balance. Decided to walk his own path. Taiza left behind the name of his youth and took on the identity that would immortalize him. Miyamoto Musashi, a name that symbolized a break with a past, the pursuit of a new identity and the commitment to becoming a one-of-a-kind samurai free from the chains of tradition and politics. Miyamoto Musashi's legend, the invincible samurai, had only just begun. The battle dust still lingered in the air, blown by the chilly wind over the Sakahara plain. Bodies were scattered around the field, a silent reminder of the brutal conflict that had changed the fate of Japan forever. Young Moshi was among the wounded, his right arm pierced by an enemy spear. He had dragged himself through the slaughter, desperately trying to flee that nether world. The searing pain in his arm was agonizing, but the wound in his pride was even greater. The Western Army's route, the dissolution of his clan and the confusion over the fate of his lord Waida Hied left him lost and bewildered. With the help of peasants he met along the way, Moshi made it to a village where he was given first aid for his wound, but the recovery was slow and painful. With no resources, he depended on the mercy of strangers to survive. Distraught and isolated, Moshi took revenge in a small hut on the village outskirts. Solitude and boredom became his greatest enemies. As his body slowly healed, his mind was tormented by uncertainty and questions. What was he to do now? What was his place in a Tokugawa-dominated Japan? Once the icon of his ambitions for glory, the sword now represented the pain of defeat and the uncertainties of the future. Musashi found himself at a crossroads, not knowing which way to go, but the flame that had been burning in his heart since childhood was not entirely extinguished. Driven by the need to overcome adversity and find a new purpose, Musashi undertook an intense self-improvement period. period. Over the days and nights of his convalescence, Musashi dedicated his time to working out his body and mind. He practiced breathing and meditation techniques learned from his monk uncle to fortify his spirit and control his consuming rage. She also studied military strategy and philosophy to understand the causes of the Sekigahara defeat and draw lessons from past mistakes. He devoured books on history, war tactics and wisdom from sages such as Confucius and Lao, trying to find knowledge and inspiration to shape his future. But the sword continued to call him. Musashi knew that the martial arts were an essential part of his identity, and he had to find a new way to express himself through them. He went on to train relentlessly, experimenting with new techniques and developing his own style, one that was more fluid, intuitive and suited to different circumstances. He learned how to use his body as a weapon, mixing agility, strength and accuracy in his movements. He found the importance of timing, observation and anticipating his opponent's movements. He found that long walks through the Japanese mountains and forests were an essential part of his training in nature. Moshi found the inner peace and inspiration to connect with his intuition and refined his skills as a samurai. After this wandering and self-improvement period, Musashi was transformed. The physical and emotional cigar scars became reminders of his toughness and determination. He emerged as a more mature warrior, both disciplined and self-aware of his strength now honed by suffering and reflection. The sword was ready to be wielded for a new purpose, the drive for technical perfection and the building of a legacy that would render him immortal. With his majestic temples and peaceful gardens, the ancient capital Kalal was also a vibrant center of culture and martial arts. Sever my blows and counter-attacking with precision, he danced with his sword, expertly trained through years of discipline, making his way through the AG. While the battle records do not document his deeds in detail, fragmentary accounts mention the bravery of a young samurai who fought with a demon's fury. His sword was said to be merciless, tearing down enemies like dry leaves in the wind. There were even whispers that he had the strength of a tango, a legendary mountain spirit capable of superhuman feats. One tale spoken in murmurs by survivors described Tazo facing a band of enemy samurai alone, protecting the rear of his troops. He was fast as lightning, his sword cutting through armor and flesh with a surgeon's precision. He was said to have struck down 7 enemies before receiving a wound to the arm. Hurt but not crushed, Tazo kept fighting, inspired by loyalty to his clan and the will to survive. The battle went on for hours, a ghoulish dance of death and destruction, but the fate of the battle was already sealed. Yasu's betrayal and strategic PLO crippled the Western Army, which found itself at a numerical and strategic disadvantage. Defeat was looming. The once lush plains of Sekigahara were now carpeted with corpses, a grotesque mass of death and destruction. The shattered and demoralized Western Army was yielding to the Tokugawa. Wounded and depleted, Tiso found himself in the middle of the stampede. The defeat was embittering, a blow to his pride and Ishins. He had fought bravely, but the victory he had so longed for slipped through his fingers. The burden of uncertainty was worse than the defeat itself. The Tokugawa had captured the feudal lord Yukita Hyde. His fate was unclear, as was the future of the Shinman clan. Teiko was alone, a masterless ronin with no purpose, drifting through a country that was now bowing to a new power. The consequences of defeat were unforgiving. The disbanded Shinman clan lost its lands and privileges. Condemned to exile, Yukita Hyde ended his life as a Buddhist monk. His military glory turned to dust, scarred by the battle and the loss of his clan. Tezo was struck by a dilemma. To whom do he now owe his loyalty? To the Toyotomi, whose cause had been trampled underfoot, or to the Tokugawa, the new rulers of Japan? His heart was wrenched between loyalty to the past and the need to survive in a new world. Ueda, a leader he admired, stood in stark contrast to Tokugawa Yasu, the ruthless victor. The defeat of Sakahara and the breakup of the Shinman clan forced So to come to terms with the frailty of loyalty in a world where ambition and betrayal reigned supreme. He needed to forge his own path, establish his values and choose his destiny in a war-torn Japan. The dilemma tormented him for years, shaping his philosophy and his quest for a fighting style that surpassed the limitations of tradition and blind loyalty. Sahara was more than a military defeat for So, it was a harsh awakening to the world's reality. Blind loyalty, battle glory, the promises of a thriving future under the banner of a powerful clan all faded like smoke when faced with the ruthless reality of defeat. Drifting aimlessly along the dusty roads of Japan, Tazo bore the battle scars and the pounding uncertainty. Tawan's words rang in his mind. True strength lies not only in the muscles but in the mind. He would need to find a new purpose, a path that would allow him to provide meaning to his life in a world that appeared to have lost its way. The Sakae experience said the seeds of a pragmatic and individualistic philosophy in Takeso. Defeat taught him that allegiance to a clan or feudal lord could be fleeting and that glory in battle was often a fleeting illusion. He understood that true strength resided in the ability to adapt, to overcome adversity, and to find within oneself the resolve to carry on even when all appeared lost. Once viewed as an instrument of war and a quest for glory, the sword turned. Mirai knew that this battle would be even more dangerous than his duel with Seo. Deni Chido was not just a skilled samurai, he was the true spirit of vengeance. The fight was scheduled for a place near the capital, an open field in the middle of a pine forest. The crowd assembled to watch the spectacle was even larger than that of the previous encounter, as Musashi's fame had spread quickly and all wanted to see the outcome of this showdown between two talented and determined samurai. Musashi, having developed a late arrival strategy to rile up his opponents and disturb their focus, decided to adopt a new tactic for this duel. He knew that Deni Chido would be thirsty for revenge and eager to face him. Moshi arrived well ahead of schedule. This time he hid in the pine trees' shade, watching the field and waiting for Deni Chido to arrive. When Deni Chido showed up, he looked like a storm was about to break out. His long sword glittered in the sun and his face oozed anger and hatred. He yelled at Moshi, "Are you hiding like a coward? Come out and take on my fury." Washi rose from the shadows, his stance even more relaxed than in the previous duel, and replied with a faint smile, "I was just marveling at the beauty of the forest, waiting for the right moment to begin our sword dance." Then Shiro's fury launched the duel as he lunged forward with a series of powerful blows. Musashi evaded nimbly, his movements quick and unforeseeable like those of a feline in search of its prey. The clash was a deadly dance of swords, a meeting of WH and spirits. With every move Dicho made, Moshi struck back with an accurate and ferocious counterattack, unsettling Master Yoshioka and revealing the weakness in his technique. Through intuition and understanding of the psychological aspects of fighting, Ushi took advantage of Dick Chido's temper, which was grown more and more out of control as his frustration mounted with the passing of time. Musashi quickly and surprisingly defused Deni, knocking his wooden sword out of his hands. Notwithstanding, Musashi used his opponent's own weapon to deliver a fatal blow to his head, terminating the duel in a flash. The crowd fell silent, startled by the fast and violent combat. The proud Yoshioka Master Dudo slumped in defeat. His revenge turned to dust. De Niro's downfall spelled the definitive end of the Yoshioka clan. Their school, once feared and respected throughout Japan, was now destroyed by the hand of a wandering samurai who had proved to be more skilled, more shrewd and more ruthless than all his masters. The Yoshioka clan's wrath, ignited by the defeat of their two masters Sido and Dizo, turned into an unstoppable thirst for revenge. They gathered in great numbers, swearing to destroy the wandering samurai who had boldly defied their tradition. In honor, the news that Moshi had accepted the clan's challenge swept through Kilo like wildfire, and the city was about to witness a show of violence and blood like never before. The spot chosen for the fight was right next to the great pine tree of the Ichi-Joy Temple, a sacred and peaceful setting, but ironically chosen for such a brutal and hopeless encounter. Musashi knew he was facing an unparalleled challenge. The Yoshioka clan would not settle for a traditional duel. They had been preparing for a full-scale confrontation, using all the means at their disposal. He had heard the rumors about the clan's intention and was aware that the number of enemies lying in wait was staggering, but his resolve was even greater. Having learned many lessons from his previous duels, he had developed his own style of combat rooted in agility, intuition and adaptability to different situations, which made him an extremely unpredictable and dangerous opponent. Moshi went to the venue on the day of the fight with his heart at ease. He had prepared for the battle not only physically but mentally as well, purifying his mind and connecting to the essence of his art through meditation. When he arrived at the site, the sunrise shone on the throng of the approaching samurai, all armed with swords, spears, bows and arrows, ready to take on the wandering samurai. The sight was breathtaking, a horde of fierce warriors bound together by a thirst for revenge marauding towards a single man. But Musashi was not fazed. He had chosen the location of the battle carefully, scouting out unfavorable terrain for the Yoshioka, an uneven field with trees and slopes that would hamper their movements. He knew that the Yoshioka were hoping to meet him in an open field where their attack techniques could be used more effectively, but he would make them fall into their own trap. He was feeling the weight of history on his shoulders, the wounded pride of the Yoshioka samurai who saw him as an intruder in their own territory, a rootless samurai who had the nerve to stand up to a tradition and prestige of the fencing school they so dearly treasured. But Moshi was not cowed by Yoshioka's presence or anger. He had one mission: to prove his worth, firmly establishing himself as a swordsman and write his own chapter in Japanese history. The fight opened with a vortex of steel, a deadly dance of swords and spears. With his fast and unpredictable movements, Washi dodged Yoshioka's blows, grabbing the opportunities that the uneven and disorganized terrain offered him. He moved like a ghost, his sword shining in the sun like lightning, cutting through the air with precision and savagery. He struck powerful, rapid blows, taking advantage of the Yoshioka's disruption at every turn and the advantage that the terrain offered him. Moshi became more confident with each enemy he took down, his spirit unwavering. He had learned from his defeat at Sekihara, had reinvented himself, and was now a completely different samurai. His words became an extension of his mind, tools for fighting, but also for self-knowledge and enlightenment. The fight was bloody and brutal, but Moshi was unrelenting, his determination unyielding.
Musashi
he had
learns
transformed
to
himself
flow
into a force
with
of
life.
nature, a samurai
Whether it
who
be with
ignored
nature,
death and pain,
other
fueled
people,
by the
or
quest
yourself,
for perfection.
there are
In
some
his art,
things you
he struck
can't
the
fight,
new leader
and
of the
some
clan,
fights
the
you
young
can't
Mitashi
win.
Chido,
But
who
once
had
you
been
accept
elected
these
as the new
truths,
Kino
once you
following his
realize your
brother's
own
death.
weakness
Musashi
and
delivered a
insignificance
fatal
in the
blow,
grand
ending
scheme
the
of
fight
things,
once and for
you
all.
will
The
be free.
Yoshioka clan's
Free to
loss
look
was
the other
crippling.
way,
Their school,
to
a
look
beacon of
inward,
tradition and
where you will
prestige,
find
had
that
been
strength,
shattered by a single
purpose,
independent
and
samurai
infinity
whose
all
spirit and
exist from
technique
within your
suppress
own
anything
self.
they had seen before.
And this isn't
Drained
just
after
idealistic
defeating
bullshit
countless
either.
enemies,
This
Musashi
philosophy
was
is
asked
literally
how he managed
reflected
to
in the
overcome
way that
so many
Takehiko
foes,
Inoue
and he
draws
replied,
vagabonds.
"Life is littered with obstacles
On top of
and
pens and
challenges.
pencils,
One cannot
he
face
often
them
uses
all at
ink
once.
brushes,
Just like in
not
life,
only to
I
color in the
focused on
blacks
facing
like most
one enemy at a
mangaka,
time
but to actually
achieve
draw the
victory."
line work.
All
And his art
fencing
embodies
schools,
that
each with
idea
their own
of flow
traditions
in the
and
way that he
techniques,
works
fought
with
for
the
prestige and
imperfections of
students,
the brush.
leaving a fertile
While
environment
he is
for
definitely the one
competition and
holding the
pursuit of
brush and
excellence
moving
in
it across the
swordsmanship.
paper,
Among these
Inoue gives
rivalries,
the ink
one
a
name
certain
rang
degree
out
of
through the
freedom to
alleys, and
flow
dojos.
on its own
Miyamoto
accord.
Musashi, the
Of course, there is
21-year-old
some
wandering
masterful
samurai,
fucking
had just
artistry on
arrived in the
display here,
capital, eager
but at
to
the same
challenge
time,
the best
there's also
swordsman,
an
not
element
only
of
to perfect
chaos.
his art, but also
Faded
to
colors,
cement his
uneven
reputation
lines,
as an
and stray
invincible
bristles
warrior. His
guided by
primary
Inoue's
target
hand
was the
create an
Yoshioka
image
school,
that is
one
all
of
at once
Kilo's most
deliberately
prestigious and
crafted
influential,
and
led by the
natural in
master
its beauty.
Yoshioka Kuro, a swordsman
And I think it can't
famous
be
for his
understated
flawless
just how
technique
cool it
and
is that
invincible
Inoue's
aura,
technique
descended
reflects
from a
his
lengthy
art
line
in
of
such a unique
instructors and
and
known for his
thematically
staring
relevant
practice,
way.
a form of meditation that
By
sharpened
the end
his
of the
focus
story,
and
Musashi is
perception.
much more
Pseudo was the
considerate of his
perfect challenge
opponents,
for Musashi,
both in
who
who he
wanted not
chooses to
only to
fight
beat him in
and how
combat,
he
but
chooses
also
to
to
fight them.
surpass the tradition
His
and
previous
weight of
disregard
history
for life
represented
gives
by the
way to a
Yoshioka
profound
school.
respect
Arrogant and
towards his
defiant
opponents,
Moshi sent
whether
a
it
letter
be
to
offering
Pseudo
peace,
offering a public
honoring
duel
them
to
in
compare
death,
techniques.
or just
The challenge
appreciating
was
the duel
accepted
they
and the
had.
venue chosen
And I
was
think
the
for
field
me,
next to
that's
the
the real
Raju
takeaway
temple.
here.
On the
Those
outskirts
small
of Kilo,
moments where
Pseudo,
Musashi just
immaculately
takes a
attired,
second
came
to
to the
reflect on the
battlefield on the
positive aspects of
designated
his
day,
life and
escorted by his
express his
disciples.
gratitude.
He oozed authority
Like how he
and
tries to find his
confidence, the
sword
outcome
after
of years
fighting
of
the
training
70
and
Yoshioka.
unawareness of his own
It made me
mastery.
think back
But
to when this
Musashi
dude was using
far too
freaking
late for
sticks
the
and
duel,
rocks to
Pseudo
beat
kept
people to
waiting
death,
for him, overwhelmed
whereas
by
now he's
impatience
lamenting
and
the
anger.
loss of his
Moshi
sword because he
eventually
knows how
arrived
hard
carrying his
Kotetsu
wooden
worked
sword
on
and
him.
dressed in
Or how about
vulgar
Musashi's
clothes. You
shallow
weren't worthy
relationship
of a
with
duel of this
Jotaro
proportion.
compared
He
to his
quickly
genuine
surveyed the
compassion
terrain
for
and his
Hiyori.
opponent's behavior.
These are
Musashi
real,
knew that Sho's
tangible
temper
changes
would be
in
his
Musashi's
greatest
character.
weapon, since he
And
had
I think it
arrived
speaks
late on
volumes
purpose,
that even when he
just to
finds
upset
himself
his opponent.
starving
When the
and
duel
working
finally
himself to the
began, the
bone
furious
every
Zoro
single
threw
day
away
for
his
scraps
bakugo and
in
drew a
some
katana.
nameless
He wanted
backwater
to kill the
village,
Chiki Ronin.
he can
Zoro
still
charged
smile
forward with the strength
like
of a
this.
tiger, but Moshi, with cat-like ability, evaded the blood he had predicted Seo's reaction and was going to use the anger his opponent felt as a weapon against him with a single precise and powerful blow. Moshi hit Kuro's left shoulder. The impact of the bulan was overwhelming, inflicting a sharp paralyzing pain in the samurai's arm. Astonished and humiliated, Sudo fell to the ground, powerless to resume the fight. The unbelieving crowd witnessed the fall of the great master Yoshiok before a wandering samurai and a simple wooden band. Had he used his sharp blade, Soro would have been dead, devastated by defeat and unable to use his arm. Sro left the Yoshioka school and retired to a Buddhist monastery, looking for a new meaning to his life in isolation and spirituality. The era of Yoshioka Sudo the Great KMO was over. Musashi's victory spread all over Kilo, establishing his reputation as a superb duelist, but the fury of the Yoshioka brothers, hungry for revenge, would lead the wandering samurai into a new and perilous battle, testing his limits and carving out the legend that would immortalize him. When Sudo, the master of the Yoshioka school, was crushed by Moshi, it echoed like thunder throughout Kilo. The clan's humiliation and the fall of the master who once epitomized the Yoshioka school's tradition and invincibility sent the clan samurai into a rage. Revenge became a battle cry. Judo's brother Yoshioka Dicho, a swordsman as skilled as his brother and renowned for strength and agility, stepped up to take charge of the school, bent on restoring lost prestige and avenging his family's honor. Dicho was an impressive individual with a ferocious edge that intimidated his opponents. His preferred weapon was known as the no dui, an extremely long and heavy sword that he used to move with breathtaking speed, overwhelming his opponents with powerful attacks. News of Denichito's challenge got back to Moshi, the wandering saw. In Japan's feudal heartland, in a whirlwind of warfare and rivalry, the legendary figure of Miyamoto Musashi arose, a wandering samurai swordmaster and brilliant strategist. His real story merges with the legends that have arisen due to his extraordinary feats, his epic duels, his incessant quest for technical perfection, and his untamed spirit have inspired admiration and fascination for CTR. The lone samurai Musashi, who followed the path of the sword and became a Japanese cultural icon, but who was the man behind the myth, a ruthless duelist pursuing glory through the death of his opponents, or a martial artist and philosopher whose sword was the path to enlightenment and harmony. The year was 1584. Japan was experiencing a stormy period, with feudal lords vying for power and land against the setting. In the quiet village of Miyamoto, a boy destined for greatness was born. His name was Benos, but the baby's arrival was marred by tragedy. His mother Omasa collapsed from childbirth complications, leaving the newborn motherless. In his early days, the premature loss of his mother deeply impacted Bosque's childhood. Raised by his father, the swordmaster Miyamoto Munai, and monk uncle, the young man grew up under the shadow of tragedy, developing an independent spirit and a deep attachment to loneliness. Through adversity, the young man built up an unwavering inner strength and determination, traits that would propel him on his journey as a samurai and turn him into the legend we know as Miyamoto Musashi. Rod of his mother's affection, Bonos, found in his father Miyamoto Munai, a ruthless master, a skilled samurai well known for his masterful swordsmanship. Andite Munai devoted himself to instructing his son in the ways of the warrior. Boss exhibited a natural ability for combat from an early age and quickly grasped the techniques taught to him by his father. The jit, an iron weapon with a hook, was to become Munai's specialty, and the young man learned to use it skillfully, evolving a unique fighting style that combined strength and precision. But Bosque's education was not confined to the sword. His uncle, the Buddhist monk Doran, relentlessly tried to inspire in him values of compassion, mental discipline, and the search for self-knowledge. But Benos was a rebel boy. The father-son relationship was a mixture of admiration and rebellion, hungry for more knowledge and acknowledgement. Bosque questioned Muni's teachings, seeking to go further than tradition and shape his own fighting style. Muni was a traditionalist and considered his son's boldness and outrage. Arguments between the two grew increasingly frequent, and these brawls were exacerbated by Muni's heavy drinking. This led to a heartbreaking estrangement between father and son. Bono's feeling misunderstood and yearning to prove himself decided to leave home and make his own way. He adopted a new name, a symbol of his independence and his resolve to become a samurai, recognized for his own abilities. Tackle, the new name chosen by Boss, signified a fresh start, a break with the past and the search for a glorious future freed from the bonds of tradition. The young warrior was prepared to face the world's challenges, brandishing his weapon and unwavering determination. Takeo started living in the woods like a beast. He was aggressive and when he encountered other young men on his path, their meetings almost always ended in conflict, spurred on by a burning desire to establish his superiority. Takeo flung himself into fights, testing his skills and learning from each engagement. He was strong and brave, and with each victory his confidence grew, boosting his ego and ambition to become a swordsman. At 13, the flame of ambition was already blazing into Takeo's heart. The news that Adam Maki, a celebrated samurai and adept at the traditional Shinto Ryo school, was challenging anyone who dared to take him on. He was traveling around Japan defying other swordsmen to test